On January 24th, Alex Pretti, a 37-year-old ICU nurse at a Minneapolis VA hospital, was shot and killed by ICE agents in the back, by the way, during an immigration enforcement operation in Minneapolis. Bystander videos make it pretty clear, and there's so many of them coming out, and they show that Preddy himself was filming the federal agents as they made their way down the street on foot. The situation escalated when an agent shoved a woman to the ground. Preddy stepped in to assist her, putting his arm around her, at which point agents pepper spray and grab him and force him to the ground. While Preddy was pinned to the ground by several agents, video pretty clearly shows the following. We're going to show some of this, but not all of it for reasons that'll be obvious. But Preddy was holding a cell phone in his right hand. An agent finds and removes, that's an important part of this story, an agent finds and removes a handgun from Preddy's waistband, basically had it tucked in his back. That agent then quickly turns around and walks off with the gun. Very shortly after that, as Preddy continues to struggle, agents fire at least 10 shots over roughly 5 seconds, killing Preddy right where he lay. And if my read of the videos is accurate, the first shots go into his back, man. It is horrific. And with the ability to watch the video over and over in slow motion, it seems like Preddy is not only shot after being disarmed, but as I said, shot in the back multiple times. Needless to say, the narrative battle of what actually happened is raging. If you've seen the footage, it is very easy to understand why people are absolutely aghast at this shooting. But as with so many things, as more and more detailed analysis kept coming out over the weekend, after the ridiculous claims that he was wielding a weapon, that he was aggressively threatening ICE agents with a gun, as all of that evaporated, a new narrative began to gain traction, namely that the gun that was removed from Preddy allegedly misfired as the ICE agent whisked it away. And it was the sound of the first shot that made the ICE officer shoot Preddy, thinking he had a gun and was firing. If you've seen the video, given how clumsy, jittery, and untrained the whole debacle looked, I would not be surprised if that's what happened. That doesn't mean that this is okay. It just means that the horrific, tragic sequence of events may have included the misfiring of the gun. Now, if you watch the video in slow motion, it really does look like the gun may have accidentally discharged. Additionally, there are unverified reports that the gun was a Sig Sauer, a gun with multiple lawsuits alleging that it misfired. Now, at this point, I know the FBI has the gun in custody, so that might have been verified at this point. We'll have to look that up. But apparently, despite the Sig Sauer themselves, the company, denying that the gun has any issues, it is an open secret, apparently, in the gun community that that particular gun will discharge without the trigger being pulled. Obviously very rare, but seems to happen. Now, regardless of whether the shooting ends up being incompetence or malice, it's shaping up to be the spark that lights all of the dynamite bundled up in Minnesota. And I am expecting things to continue to escalate from here, especially all the things that we've seen with the coordination, the instruction manuals on how to track and disrupt ICE, all of the signal groups that were infiltrated. So we see just how much coordination there is. So all of that is going to be coming out as well. But this is an unmitigated disaster. And ultimately, it's going to be up to all of us to slow this down, to try to find ways to de-escalate, to hopefully convince Trump that you cannot just keep pushing this forward. You can't keep escalating. You can't just keep hammering people until morale improves. Like, that isn't going to work, especially not if this is an organized resistance. If the federal government makes the mistake of having an only up escalatory response, then the people are going to be justified more and more for pushing back. Remember, we have a Second Amendment in this country for a reason. We had a founding father who believed and stated very clearly that liberty is secured, or must be watered, I think was the exact quote, must be watered by the blood of patriots and the tyrannical alike. This is one of those things where you've got a nation with a history of using weapons to stand up against tyrannical governments. You have it baked into our DNA. And so if you just use the hammer, then you're going to see further and further escalation, and people are going to needlessly die. So while I think it is insane to resist arrest. At the same time, I think it is insane to send a roving band of angry young men into these situations without the necessary level of restraint or even feeling of safety so that they can, in a coordinated fashion, calm these things down. But that's not what's happening. I certainly don't agree with Minnesota's response, but I don't agree with the current federal response, which is only making things worse.
Right now, ICE is happening in Minnesota, but it's happening across the country. There's ICE raids in mostly every state. Earlier this year, we talked about when Trump brought ICE to California. They did that whole military exhibition through Leimert Park with the tanks and all that other stuff kind of driving through. That happened, and then there was pushback, there were protests. They then withdrew. What do you think is making them double down in Minnesota?
So if you look at Minnesota, there is a question that needs to be asked. I want to be very clear. I don't have any more information than anybody else. I'm watching the same news segments that other people are watching. But there are two things to note in Minneapolis. One is the just systemic refusal of the governor and the mayor to cooperate with ICE. So they are making it as hard as possible, including asking people to put their bodies on the line, to literally go out and protest. Now, they say peacefully. I want to be very clear. They're not telling people to rock up with their guns, but they are telling people to keep making the noise, keep going out there, keep doing what you're doing. Okay, so that gives people a permission structure. They're calling off the police, obviously. The police are not assisting ICE at all. Now, I think that Karen Bass was also on that spectrum. So that isn't the whole of this. The other is this didn't turn deadly until the fraud was uncovered. Once the fraud was uncovered, then it started really to escalate. And so I don't think you can remove from the table the fact that you've got all of this fraud that is looming in the background. You have a governor who, when the fraud came out, stepped back and said, I'm not going to run for re-election. And so it is unknown exactly what that number ends up being, but you obviously have a permission structure for some absolutely insane things going on in Minnesota, full stop, without this. But it means something that you have 50 states that have immigration enforcement happening in them. You have states that have way more, like orders of magnitude. In fact, can you pull up there's a heat map of the US that shows that Minnesota is like in the middle in terms of how much immigration enforcement has been being done there. And it is nonetheless got a level of pushback and violence that is orders of magnitude larger than other places. So option number one, ICE is being unusually draconian in Minnesota because Trump hates walls and wants to punish him. It's possible. Okay, I won't deny that that could be what's going on. The other interpretation is that there's deeper coordination to push back against federal law enforcement coming from Minnesota, potentially related to the fraud. When I watch the video, I'm sure I see something that other people don't. I see a buffoon who has no right to be on the job. He is like very unconfident, very like jittery. I look at that and I think this job is brutally difficult. It's ultra high risk. You've got to have the best of the best. If we're going to put these guys in this kind of situation, they've got to be elite. They've got to be well compensated. They've got to be vetted to the ends of the earth. They've got to be put through training that is not only about like the physicality of it, it's about the mindset and how to deal with these difficult situations. And I understand America may not want to pay for that in terms of dollars and cents, but it works.
Trump already did.
So very different rollout than what I'm talking about, which is when you start training these guys, like the thing that they do requires them to engage with the public, de-escalate, and be ready to pepper spray, shoot someone, whatever. This guy, in my opinion, clearly was not up to that task, clearly should not have fired. But the answer to that is not no ICE, because you have laws for a reason. You can't have illegal immigrants running around in your country, which is already, by the way, that is a thing I have decided, right? So I don't expect that to be universal. But from my perspective, to get where I want to go, thriving middle class, that's just an absolute must. Law and order, just like tippy top of the thing. You look at the way that things play out and you have to take them piece by piece. You can't have a guy like this. It leads to catastrophic outcomes. Also, resisting arrest is the dumbest thing on planet Earth that you can do. Both things can be true. They shouldn't have shoved the woman. They shouldn't have pepper sprayed the dude. And Preddy shouldn't have been struggling. Watching the video, he does not reach for his gun. Anybody saying that, I don't know what they're watching. There's no way they saw that video. As a PSA, for the love of God, if you find yourself in this situation where you were trying to peacefully protest, you have to stop resisting. And if you don't, now you're going to find yourself increasing the likelihood you get shot. You don't drop it to zero because these guys are acting tyrannically. So I'm just saying, that's where I do not understand how people are mapping the situation as if we don't have people who are showing up to, like, they are so antagonistic towards ICE. And that is coming out in these moments of confrontation where they try to run, they try to resist arrest, and it's just increasing. The message now is one of resistance. The message now is protest peacefully, but have your gun on you, organize, try to impede. Like there is another layer of that. And I'm saying, I'll just speak at the individual level. Dear person who is trying to make your voice heard in America, you have every right to say the government's become tyrannical and I'm going to pull my gun out. But just know that when you stand for that, it could mean prison forever. It could mean you get shot dead. And so it better be that place for you where you really believe this is the right play. If you don't, and he didn't take out his gun, he did not reach for it in any way, shape, or form. I think he's beyond reproach in that way from where I'm at. You had a guy who was in that moment was 100% peaceful until they took him to the ground. And then he's resisting and ratcheting things up. It doesn't even necessarily mean that it would play out any differently, but he's in a much better position if he's not fighting back, pulling, resisting, making them yank harder, trying to shove them down. Like that's where all of this stuff goes crazy.
A lot of people are saying that these protests are like organized. Do you believe in, to the larger fault, that this is all a coordinated effort?
I think it is being coordinated. The question is the coordination 20%? Is the coordination 80%, 100%? That I don't know. That will come out in the fullness of time. If we miss the angle that this stuff is coordinated, then I think that we're not going to understand what's actually happening here.
Let's jump into coordinated for a second, because I want to like really nail that definition. I know people in LA, they're part of alternative political groups. So they're fringe left groups or democratic socialists or things like that.
Yep.
For those organizations, while they're coordinated, meaning that there's a group of people who get together and want to make it happen, to me, I think that's different than this was Biden, George Soros, given by an NGO. They have $4 million behind that. Do you think it's coordinated on the governmental level where there's a puppet behind it? Or is this just local people getting together and coordinating?
I was completely transformed as an individual by Mike Benz. When I did the research for that episode and I realized the way that NGOs coordinate and put dollars on the street to destabilize governments, to gain power, I was like, whoa, like this is a real thing. And it doesn't just happen elsewhere. It's not just the CIA running this stuff. In fact, NGOs sprung up with the modern incarnation of the way that they act because the CIA was getting curtailed. And so they were like, oh, we're not going to be able to do it through the CIA. No worries. We need to do it. So we're going to go do it in these following ways. Anybody that thinks that we don't have money on the streets in China to try to destabilize China is a fool. Anybody that doesn't think we have money on the streets in Iran trying to destabilize Iran is a fool. Anybody that thinks Iran doesn't have money on the streets in Tel Aviv is a fool. Anybody that doesn't think China has money on the streets trying to destabilize America, Russia has money on the streets trying to destabilize America. The part that gets unnerving is when you go, oh, Americans have money on the streets in America trying to destabilize America. And I think in all capital letters, there are factions within America that want to overthrow the US government in no uncertain terms. And
in order to lead to a revolution or in order to get somebody else in power?
I think you have both. So Tim Walz does not strike me as a revolution guy, but he does strike me as a get the Democrats in power guy.
Okay.
So you've got those guys working within the system, but doing things that I think all of us would feel the way that I feel about the instruction manual of how to impede federal law enforcement is the way that I feel about money in politics. It's like, okay, it's legal, but it is also extremely destructive. And so now you've got a problem where I don't want to see people organizing against the federal government in that way, where it's funded by an NGO. So there's millions of dollars. These guys are being outfitted and coordinated like paramilitary groups, and they're going in and creating autonomous zones within a city when the federal government is enforcing federal law that they were elected specifically to enforce. So it's like, yo, that is not how I want to see things play out. I don't want to see what are essentially psyops being run on America. Color revolutions is probably a better way to say it. Being run on American soil by American NGOs or foreign NGOs for that matter. I don't want it to be anybody. But yes, I think that we have coordination with the government as evidenced by the fact that somebody in Walz' administration is in the signal chats. It'll be interesting to see if there are more. There very well might be. The fraud. I think there's so many whistleblowers going. Tim Walz knew all about the fraud. We have been complaining to him about it for years, and he has done absolutely nothing. So I think all of these things are going to come out. We are going to find a very distressing level of coordination, but I don't know. We don't have all the facts. This is conjecture and hearsay at this point. This is all allegedly. I do not know. I will be more than happy to accept that I was wrong about all this. Tim Walz is completely clean. I want to see this play out in the actual court system. I don't want to see people going berserk. Like, this is where everybody has to admit they don't know what's happening. They may have suspicions, they may think, but they certainly don't know. And I certainly don't know. But that's the internal logic that I'm working under right now. But I want to see it play out.
From Pac-Man, it does appear that a negligent discharge was the first shot. It happened as the officer took the gun off Alex. It was away from the action, and the other officers only shot after hearing the first shot.
Yeah, we should play that. Can you pull that slow-mo clip up? The gun jerks in his hand, and it jerks exactly at the sound of the first shot. All right, with that, look at your screens. Check this out. So this is the guy walking away with the gun. So you can pause for a second. So the guy that you see in the gray jacket is the one that disarmed Preddy. He gets up, and I presume he's trying to clear the field of the gun. And the gun right about that frame on your screen is where it goes off, and you hear that first report. Again, this is just to have all of the facts on the table. This does not excuse the guy shooting. You can't hear a gunshot and then just start unloading on the person in front of you. That is so fucking wild. You have to know that that was actually the shooter. For all you know, it was somebody else on your side. It literally was somebody else on your side that was holding the gun at a minimum when it went off, not aiming at that person. So you cannot just shoot first and ask questions later. So in no way, shape, or form does this excuse what happened, in the same way that Preddy struggling does not excuse the fact that they shot him. That is not my pitch. Dear America, please remember you have a constitutional right to carry a weapon. We have a constitutional right to stand up against a tyrannical government. The right question to ask is, when do we think that it's worth laying our life down? So I have no beef. That guy did not reach for his gun. He had his gun on him legally. He had a legal right to carry. So man, if you've got beef with that, I better see that same energy when it's a school shooter or somebody on the right, because Americans have the right to bear arms, okay? It is the Second Amendment of the Constitution. You have to take this guy's actions for what they were. He was peaceful. He did not reach for his gun. He did not do anything that should have ended up with him being shot. And so whether he was there to start or not, like if you roll up with the intent of starting, but you don't start, I'm not the thought police. Nobody's the thought police. And so going after somebody like a precog from Minority Report is completely out of the question for me. I do not want to live in that world. So your mind is yours. It should not be violated via AI. But if you do something, then yes, if they've got their eye on you because they can tell that you're in a bad way, sure. But somebody making a move on you before you do something, hell no. Hell no.